Well, hello, everybody. I'm John Smieja. I'm the Vice President of Circularity at Trellis Group. As Bill mentioned, we used to be called GreenBiz, rebranded to Trellis Group last year. I think the mics will turn on eventually.
This is great.
Mark mentioned using your inside versus your outside voice. I'm going to use my inside voice, my activist voice today as I ask these questions, and maybe the panelists will use their outside voices so they don't get in trouble at their companies.
Get some things going.
You know,
I want people to learn
you may have seen the title of this session. It's long. We've got a lot of R's in the title, including an I for innovation. I'm not going to read it because it is so long, but what I did want to mention is I've been getting really interested recently in the concept of Umwelt, so the way that different organisms experience the world, right? Our own perception, our own way that we experience the world. And one way is through vision, right? And there's 4 stages of vision that have been defined by this biologist, Dan Eric Nilsson. The first stage is basically just being able to sense light. And when I think about sensing light as a form of vision, as a corollary to the circular economy, I think about only thinking that the circular economy is recycling. It's important, but it's definitely limited. Scope 2 vision, or stage 2 vision, is when you can actually sense not only light, but the direction of light based on shadows. And when I think of that form of vision as a corollary to the circular economy, I think of other end-of-use applications: repair, refurbishment, resale, remanufacturing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of R's. Stage 3 vision is when these shaded photoreceptors start to cluster and animals or organisms can actually start to see images, right? They might be blurry, they might not be in color, but they can actually make out images. And when I think of the circular economy there, I think of the entire life cycle of a product from extraction to end of use. So now we're widening the aperture further. We can solve more problems, but we're still not quite there. Stage 4 vision is what humans have, what chimpanzees have. It's what we use to sort of guide our way through the world. We can form really crisp images. We can see colors. We can make out things at distance. This is sort of what I consider the next step in the circular economy, where we have to go from here to actually overcome some of the issues of linearity that we're currently seeing. So that's just my way of queuing up this conversation. And I'm going to challenge all of our panelists, when you have a chance to answer, because there's 6 of you, keep everything to 2 minutes or less. I'm going to be counting in my head, or there's this big, giant clock in front of us. So try to keep it to 2 minutes or less so we can get through everything. And I have one question for each of you to kick us off. And I kind of put these in order based on sort of how I see your companies and your work fitting into the circular economy. So I'm going to start with you, Divya Varadaraj.
You can try.
Varadaraj.
Varadaraj. But you were close.
Director of Sustainability, Head of Sustainable Products and Materials at Kimberly-Clark. So Divya, you mentioned to me when we spoke that one part of your responsibility is on product design and material selection. So I want to start with you, and let's talk about how a company like Kimberly-Clark or anybody working within the economy can start to think about the circular economy from design at the beginning.
Thanks, John. Thanks for putting me first. So even if I take up like 3 minutes, it's
then
hard
everybody
to
else
stop.
just has to wait.
Exactly. I felt like the last panel was just so fantastic. There are a couple of concepts I want to borrow and build on that, right? When we think about innovation, it's really important to meet the moment. I forget who it was who said that, but we think about circularity or recycling and reuse, and everybody thinks of us as like tree huggers, right? Oh, you guys, like a bunch of people who want to just use the same stuff we've been using. But the minute you start to shift that lens to one of innovation, it starts to become a different conversation. And that's what Kimberly-Clark wants to bring forth, right? And that's what my team approaches it as, is everything that we do post-product development is all kind of a Band-Aid of not designing the product in the way that it was supposed to, right? Not using the right materials, not thinking about what is the end of life of that product. An iPhone is a great example, right? We can't imagine life without it today, but I doubt they thought through, what happens when you have to actually dispose of the battery, and where do we get all the rare earth materials, all that good stuff. And I think that's the fundamental issue with when we discuss anything around circularity or reusability is now we're doing Band-Aids and patches, right? Not that it's not important to think about emissions or think about end of life, but If we started with innovation and did it with better materials that actually included sustainability in the product design itself, we would be able to create a more sustainable supply chain, which then de-risks the business altogether, right? So, and it is a longer term play for sure, right? Where instead of thinking, oh, I'm just gonna make this really cool product, if you took maybe even 6 more months to figure out if you can invest in better materials development beforehand, it just creates a better, more sustainable circular economy that benefits everybody. So that's how we view, I would say, front-end innovation as like a standard way of operating that would save us all like a lot of heartache post-usage.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of the concept of engineering that Joe McLeod invented. If you've read the book Ends, it's really good. It's about how we design products with the end in mind, and it helps not only the business but the consumer, right? A lot of us have products in our drawers that we don't know how to get rid of because of bad engineering. Next, we have Daniel Farrera from Gruma-Mission Foods. Daniel, I'm going to skip down to you. We're going to jump all over this panel today. So Gruma Foods, famous for your Mission tortilla chips and tortillas. You span a wide range of products, though, at your company. And when we met, you mentioned water reuse as one level of circularity. So I'd love to talk a little bit about water because it's often an underappreciated part of the circular economy. It's obviously a vital resource. It is imminently reusable. All the water on Earth has been here since the time immemorial. So anyway, could you talk a little bit about how your company thinks about water and what you're doing to improve your water footprint and circularity around that material?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. As Divya was saying, when you think about circularity, you need to look at the big picture, right? And it's the subject of connecting dots. You need to view your inputs and also the outputs, and identify opportunities on how you can close the loop, right? So in this example on how we view the water usage in our company, well, we have a really high compromise in terms of or responsibility in terms of how we use resources because we produce food. We know that all our products end up in your table with history, family, recipes. So we understand that, we get that. And what we are selling, it's also a lot of water. We sell carbohydrates in the form factor of tortillas, right? So in a way, we're selling water. So we need to be very careful because it's one of our main inputs. The example that I can give you is we are always looking into effectiveness in resource management and how we can reduce the amount of resources we use. So we implemented technology in our operations. We, in our mills, do nixtamalization process. And compared to traditional process, with that technology, we have a 58% less water consumption. Also, in our facilities, every facility has water treatment. And that is done so we can reduce the impact in our disposals. And because we value what we are disposing, we wish to give it another opportunity. So, for example, in US, we use it to irrigate our gardens and some crops that are triticale, soy, sorghum, corn, that is also used as animal feed. So this is repurposed and this closes the loop. In Mexico, So in Mexico, as I was saying, we're also trying to see how we can connect that water and bring it to the farmers so they can use it, and in that way they will improve their production, but it will also strengthen and bring up resilience to our supply chain. So that's how we view the circularity.
Love that 58% reduction. That's a big reduction in any material. So congrats on that.
Are we able to ask questions of the panelists?
Sure, go for it.
I'm free.
But you save money by reducing your water use, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yes.
Circularity is a cost savings project.
A great question. We're gonna go all the way down to the end to Abraham Tueme from the Director of Sustainability at Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages. Is Andy still in the room? Don't get in a fight. I'm glad I have the Coke guy on my panel and not the Pepsi guy. Let's just put it out there. So you're one of the largest bottlers of Coca-Cola products in the U.S., and I know that you're working on incorporating post-consumer recycled content into your bottles. But I'm also curious about how or if you work with Coca-Cola directly on initiatives and what you're exploring to increase circularity. So maybe talk about the bottles, talk about if you have any work directly with Coca-Cola on their initiatives.
Absolutely, sounds great. Well, first, just to level set for everybody to know what being one of the top bottlers in the U.S. means, the Coca-Cola system is set up as a way where you have the Coca-Cola company as the brand owner and the one that produces the concentrate, so they still keep the secret of how all the products are made. We still don't know how they're made. But then they send those over to us. They send us the concentrate. We bottle those products, and we distribute all across, in our case, Texas and parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So we're part of a larger company called Arca Continental that's based in Mexico, headquartered in Monterrey, Mexico. I believe same as Gruma, so you know we have some common ground there. And we work with Arca and with their one of the largest actually PET supplier, recycled PET suppliers in the world, PetStar, to source recycled resin for our bottles. In order for us to source that recycled resin, we first create collection programs all across our territory to bring those bottles back and to feed those bottles into the supply chain. I actually see that some of our partners are here. We have Susanna over there from Keep Texas Beautiful. We create recycling programs with communities to get those bottles and get those containers back. But when we look at circularity, as my fellow panel members have mentioned, it goes beyond the recycling concept. And for us, that's why we're testing other things. Do we have anybody in the room from El Paso or San Antonio? Perfect. So I don't know if you've ever been to a taqueria and you've seen a bottle made. Yeah. Okay. So for all the rest of us, bottles in those two particular markets, we're testing a pilot for reusable bottles. So there we're bringing reusable glass bottles. We're having those for direct consumption, and we're bringing those back to our facilities for cleaning and processing. It's a pilot because a few years ago, as a system and really the whole beverage industry, we moved away from reuse containers into one-use containers. Main reason for that was there was a significant emissions factor related to bringing empty bottles back into our facilities, but we're trying to find what the right balance of the two is. And that's kind of a way that today we keep testing and we keep innovating in our portfolio to make sure that, yes, recycled content is great, and a lot of you have bottles in your tables that are actually made from 100% recycled plastic. But beyond that, we need to find also new alternatives and new solutions to keep boosting circularity across our portfolio.
Excellent. All right, now we're going to go right next door to you there to Troy. Troy Swope is the co-founder of Terram Lab. And this is going to stay on the theme, I guess, of plastics and packaging. So Terram is working on eliminating plastics from a bunch of packaging applications. Tell us a bit about your company, because I'm sure a lot of people in the room aren't familiar, and some of the challenges associated with this transition away from single-use plastics.
Coca-Cola is a challenge. I think first off, if we could all do me a favor, my son has decided to be a planet technologist, and he doesn't get embarrassed easily, but I think we can embarrass him. So Eli, if you could stand up, if everyone can say hi, Eli.
Hi, Eli.
Hi, Eli. There we go. Yeah, I had to do that. So Terram Lab is a material science company with on a mission to develop the technologies to eliminate single-use plastic, especially in food and packaging. In addition to the plastic in our food and packaging, there's harmful chemicals like PFAS, which I don't know if most of us don't know, but every single one of us here have PFAS, forever chemistry, in their bodies. I think we had to go to a blood bank in 1960 in Japan to find blood that didn't have forever chemicals in it. We're on the mission to make that packaging healthy, to eliminate the harmful chemicals and the plastic in that packaging. And when we do that, that creates an unlock for circularity. When you think about it, there's billions of tons of food and packaging waste in quick service restaurants alone in the United States. So if we could take all that harmful chemicals and the plastic out of that packaging, we can unlock that value in that food waste And what we've learned in the Marin Carbon Project as well is that packaging with the carbon and the food waste, phosphate, nitrates, is actually an ideal source for plant stimulation in the mega trend of regenerative agriculture. But if we can take and build trust in that packaging, in just simply the quick service restaurant space, we can unlock that circularity and get all that waste, tens of billions of pounds, I screwed that up, pounds of waste back to a farm. And when you think about in our country today, what that impact would be, the two major rivers in this country, the Missouri River and the Mississippi River, the EPA says don't swim in it, don't eat fish in it, right? Don't eat the fish out of it. These are the biggest rivers in our country, and we pick on China for the environmental issues. And our two biggest rivers in this country we can't touch. So the idea of circularity starts with we got to build trust in packaging again, because we're poisoning you today. We're going to build that trust, and once we build that trust in the packaging, we could unlock that food waste and packaging waste and get it back to a farm and help the entire planet. But step one is help you, the human.
Yeah, and it's such an important topic too, because it also helps rebuild topsoil, which we know is deteriorating. I fortunately live in one of the few places where you can still eat fish and swim in the Mississippi, because I'm so far north.
You're in Minnesota?
I'm in Minnesota, so it hasn't yet been
You're at the source?
industrialized way up there. Okay, so next we're going to go to Dr. Robert Miles, right next to me here. He's the co-founder and CTO at Momentum Technologies. You're the first, I guess, and only of our panelists who works specifically on end-of-use issues, right? Is that true? You're working on recycling or anyway, moving on. Tell us a bit about Momentum, because I clearly have it confused, and why end-of-use interventions are so important for the transition, not only to a circular economy, but also to our low-carbon economy future.
Sure. Thank you so much, John. Before I tell you a little bit about what Momentum does and what it does, let me tell you a little bit of why. Again, as one of the co-founders, I actually am a serial entrepreneur. This is my 8th company, and believe it or not, my previous company was in oil and gas. Surprise, surprise, from Texas. And we used special algorithms to make predictions. You call it now AI. Some of my Texas barbecue buddies called it A1, but otherwise, anyhow, it wasn't until I realized I actually spent some time out in the fields, seeing the pools, seeing the spills, seeing the flaring, that I decided that really the light went on. I needed to focus more on recyclable technologies. So partnered with Oak Ridge National Labs, spent 10 years developing the technology, so I guess I'm an overnight success. And spun it out to actually create a demo plant last year. It's operating very well. And really the goal for this was really to make a platform technology, not just to solve one problem, but to solve a range of problems in recycling a wide range of different end-of-use products. So one of our first areas to focus was electric vehicles, electric vehicle batteries. Obviously, there's a lot of waste, but a lot of valuable metals in that, lithium, nickel, cobalt. We also do e-waste, which is printed circuit boards, et cetera. We do recycling in the steel industry, stainless steel. We also do mining tailings to make mines more efficient. And last but not least, rare earth elements, things like dysprosium, praseodymium, I don't know the namium. Don't ask me, I'll move onium. So one of the key things was make a platform technology to cycle a lot of different things. Another key goal, which we accomplished, was to make it very local. So one thing about recycling is the waste is distributed all over the place, particularly end-of-use waste. If just look at vehicles, electric vehicles are never really aggregated in one spot. Once they're done being used, they're pretty much in every city, in every town, every urban area. So we wanted to be local, basically to match supply and demand, kind of like the same way Dunkin' Donuts and police stations operate. And then we also needed to scale it. We wanted to make sure that it was very scalable, so it could start very small and it could grow as the local supply grew. And as important, or probably the most important thing, is to make sure that the economics were highly attractive. So we believe We've been working very hard to make a totally self-contained recycling unit, so there's no waste going out. Basically, all the energy is very low energy. And so, again, we believe we have industry-leading economics. The way to make it more real is think about what the U.S. government does. For example, how much is a nickel worth? You guys are too slow. It's 5 cents. It was, but it's worth 5 cents. But how much does it cost to make a nickel? Like almost 14 cents. So we're doing that in reverse. We're taking basically what the government did as far as making nickels, and we're taking product, end-to-use product, basically worth 5 cents, and taking out the components that are worth now 14 cents. So again, superior economics. The economics have to be there for the technology to be adopted. And also, as the fluctuations of price come and go, you want to be robust in that environment. And again, kind of the good side or the silver lining is it not just reduces all the mining. Mining is such a waste. If you just look at nickel mining, for example, you have not just the mess and the strip mining of that, you also have the deforestation, you have the CO2 penalties going by, and again, our process was also made very much because it's closed to be highly efficient as far as CO2 emissions. So let me just end it there.
I love the reverse nickel analogy. Quick question for the audience. How many people sitting out there have an unused consumer electronic product in a drawer or a closet at your house? Old cell phone, old iPad, right? There was a study done in Minnesota where I live. There's enough consumer electronics in people's drawers and closets to make 55,000 EVs out of the copper in those products.
That's what we do.
It's pretty crazy. So take those in somewhere. Best Buy takes them. I know that. Other people do too.
We take them too.
Yes. Great. And last but not least, we go to Kevin Norfleet in the middle. He's Global Sustainability Director at Celanese. Kevin, I waited to come to you because Celanese is a chemical manufacturer, so you're at the very front of a lot of supply chains, but you're also investing in the circular economy at the very end, maybe the ultimate end of life, through investment in carbon capture and utilization. Talk to us a little bit about why you're getting into that and sort of how it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm a little bit out of place because, like you said, I'm way at the front end of the chain. So, like, we make a precursor to make PET for a bottle, to give you an example. We make a lot of other chemistries. I mean, kind of to what you were saying, ultimately I can point to where we have components in just about any product on the market. So very, very much at the very front end of the chain. But what's really interesting about Celanese in particular, so we're about a $10 billion chemical company. We sell about $10 billion worth of products. But it just so happens to be that our chemistry is really ideal for carbon capture. The building blocks we use to make our products are really, really great at potentially starting from CO2 as a feedstock. And so we were fortunate to actually turn on at the beginning of last year what we think is the largest carbon capture and utilization project in the world, where we're taking about 400 million pounds a year of CO2 emissions. The vast majority of those, which are actually from other companies, so we are pulling CO2 from across our fence line. This is at a facility we have outside of Houston, Texas, and we're turning that CO2 into chemistry, and then we turn that chemistry into other chemistry and other chemistry, and eventually we can sell it into a whole host of products. And so, you talk about recycling, and recycling is not just plastic. There's a lot of products where conventional plastics recycling doesn't really make sense. A lot of our chemistry goes into like adhesives. It goes into paint. You can't recycle adhesives and recycle paint the way you can recycle plastic. So we need other options. We need to be open to innovation, and we think carbon capture and utilization, at least in the case of our chemistry, is a fantastic pathway. We've had opportunities to collaborate with brands like Henkel so they can make adhesives from CO2. We actually had an announcement this morning with a paint company in the southwestern U.S., Dunn Edwards, so they can make paint from CO2 emissions. So very much it's about the same narrative, but looking for different ways to create that circularity.
Love that. It reminds me of Bill McDonough, one of the sort of early thinkers on Cradle to Cradle, always talks about carbon not being the problem. It's just carbon in the wrong place that's a problem. So I love the idea of trying to use it. Okay, so now I have just a couple of questions for anybody on the panel that wants to answer them, hopefully most of you, before we turn it over to the audience. So you all come at this challenge of shifting from linearity to circularity from different sectors of the economy, different types of companies. I'd love to hear from each of your perspectives, what is one key hurdle that your company or industry has to overcome to unlock this promise of a circular economy? And I'm gonna go down to the end because Abraham's looking at me. So why don't you start?
Absolutely. Well, I love this question because some of the, you asked for one, but I'm gonna be a rebel. I'm gonna do two. One is on internally. One is the fact of the matter is, and it changes between our packaging materials. But I think everybody, when you're thinking of Coca-Cola and how Coca-Cola can improve on circular economy, you're thinking of plastic bottles. So let's focus on that. So on the front end, when we're buying resin, recycled resin is more expensive than virgin. It is something that needs to go through additional processes. It is heavily linked to the price of virgin plus the incremental cost of collecting and bringing back and processing. So it requires an internal sell of, this is something that we need to do. This is something that is the right decision for how we do business and is the right decision for us as a company so that we can continue being this company in the future. On the other end, we have the consumer side, and this is where I think there's a challenge that is shared across anybody that's on consumer goods, but that, again, being one of the most recognizable companies in the world, we tend to get the spotlight on issues like this. And that is that because of the various access of recycling in the United States and because of the confusion that variability in access has, we end up sometimes with materials that don't make their way into the supply chain, don't make their way into a recycling facility to be processed and made into new bottles. So the challenge there becomes, any solution that we want to bring in, we need to consider that we are not the only player in the process, and that every decision that we make will still need to get that buy-in from the consumer. So you can see in those bottles that I was mentioning earlier, there's a message there that this bottle is made from 100% recycled plastic. That's a message that we have to continuously negotiate and push for with our marketing teams, because any marketing team, they're going to want to see their logo big, bright, front and center. And having anything else competing for that attention with the consumer is challenging to achieve. But we do that so that we can then create that awareness of, like, this bottle does actually have a potential for a second life. We just need you to help us out on that first step, and we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Well, before we move on to the next person, I know Keith Harrison from the Recycling Partnership is speaking later. They do this 50 states of recycling, or a recycling report that talks about access, and you mentioned access and how varied it is from state to state. So I think that's an important factor here. Who wants to take this question next?
I might add, as an upstream producer, the biggest challenge we have is demand signals. Upstream chemical producer, it's really hard to see the clear pull for these solutions just because there's so many steps in these value chains. And I mean, we know that the demand is there maybe at one end, but the structures that create that clear signal for us as a producer to say this is what we want and this is what's interesting very often doesn't exist. I sometimes joke with people of saying, sustainability dies in middle management, because very often you have large corporate goals, but it doesn't get reflected in the individual business line or product line owner to actually action it. And so that's what I see as a really big challenge.
I've been in middle management. A lot of things die in that space. Who else wants to talk about this? Oh, Daniel.
I have a perspective to add to it that is, broader than any one company resolving it, is a lack of infrastructure. Right? We just don't have infrastructure in place that can adequately separate and create the channels for end of life. Like, Kimberly-Clark creates diapers, right? So if you made a fully compostable diaper, as an example, do I have a compostable bin in every single household where it's easy for the consumer to put it in, be collected, and sent off to one of you guys' companies to create something super valuable? And that leads me to the money trail, which is, it's not that valuable to recycle that into like a fertilizer or something versus taking nickel out of a nickel. That is way more lucrative for people to do, right? So until we have infrastructure at scale, it is hard to put some of these sustainability solutions into place.
Daniel, I know you're itching to answer this one. Go ahead.
Okay, so as Divya was saying, something that it's pretty noticeable is that because we don't have right now a baseline in terms of the maturity towards focusing on sustainability and circularity, we have to solve it in other ways. And those other ways are collaboration and technology. Right now, we are deeply in need on dominating technology so we can solve problems that right now with our current capabilities are not feasible. And meanwhile that's happening, we need to coordinate or collaborate with our peers. The main subject that I've been hearing on all these panels has been that the core issue is integration. Right now we have a lot of knowledge that's no longer a big issue. We have information everywhere. We also have the evolution of cognitive abilities by using the AI, right? So right now this is also something that is leveraging how we understand the problem. Now we need to coordinate legislation, our peers, the other companies, the people, and the culture. And meanwhile that is maturing, we need to do homework to find new technologies while this is maturing, so it's easier to establish this type of solutions.
Excellent. Robert, did you have something to add?
Yeah, you did. I'd just like to kind of echo a previous answer that was given, and that was basically the infrastructure, particularly for electric vehicle batteries, which is going to be a big waste source coming down the pike pretty quickly. There is no real centralized collection, disposal, who pays for what? Is it going to be charged by the OEMs, by the car companies, by the dealerships, by the state? All this is still up for grabs. So one thing that has to be put into place is a little bit of a more regulatory, or at least a market-driven framework on how and who pays for what for these future recycling efforts. The second one is, again, the whole ecosystem is still under evolution. Having seen this industry from its early stages, it was kind of the Wild West for quite a while, meaning every man and woman for themselves, trying to do it on their own. Now it's kind of evolved to much more collaborative. So in the last year, we used to have a handful of customers. Now some of our current customers are actually, as of last year, were our competitors. Because they were trying to solve a problem. We solved a problem that they couldn't solve, and we found a couple of problems they solved for us as well. So it goes from highly competitive to now everyone's really trying to pull together, find the best solution, find the real solution, because in the end, it all comes down not just to the ecosystem, not to the infrastructure, but all the economics have to work as well. And again, driving to the economics where, again, end prices fluctuate, whether it's lithium, cobalt, nickel, fluctuate depending on what's going on as far as the world or what's going on as the economy. You got to be robust. You got to be profitable. You got to be able to make people money. And in the end, the money kind of votes where the best solution is. So all the table pounding can really make you feel good, can really build enthusiasm, but in the end, the economics have to be there because that's where the final answer is going to go.
Love that. You mentioned electric vehicles. We've also got solar panels, wind turbines. There's a bunch of things that are going to be big waste sources in the next decade.
Yeah, and you got to be able to recycle all of it. So
yeah,
Maybe they could wrap the electronics in diapers and throw them out. I think there's synergy here.
Troy, last word on this on the big hurdles.
I think in relative to single-use plastics, our biggest hurdle is good enough. I think, and an example of that would be the word recyclable. I think recyclable is where brands are now going, hey, I may use 80% virgin plastic, but everything's recyclable, so I'm going to pass 80% of responsibility for someone else to find value in this, and therefore, a decade after a plastic ocean comes out, we have made no change to the amount of plastic that's going into our oceans because it's good enough. Brands are going, our strategy is to make sure everything's recyclable, right? But I have no personal responsibility in that. I think we need to shift the narrative in the discussion to be ED, recycled, composted, biodegraded, right? Marine degradable. We can't just be, I'm going to recyclable because I'm going to hand the responsibility off to the next person, Right?
Yeah, because as was mentioned,
And that's what happened.
Yeah, the recycling rates aren't increasing on some of these materials, even if they are listed as recyclable.
And we're increasing the amount of recyclable material, but there's no value for it.
Yeah. Well, I always start with the negative because I'm pessimistic. So I started with the hurdles. But I would love to go back to the whole group and ask, what are the biggest opportunities? Why are your companies invested in a future circular economy? What's the point? Who wants to start?
I would maybe start and just say it's a competitive advantage. I mean, while better demand signals would certainly be nice, there are companies and our customers who want these things. Particularly in Europe, there's still a great deal of demand and interest in being able to differentiate in the market with products that are lower carbon footprint or made from CO2. Again, that, creating narratives, creating interest opportunities. So, regardless of what's happening in the U.S., speaking as a large global company, we have a global marketplace, and there's absolutely still a lot of interest in a lot of different places for these kind of solutions.
Love that, Kevin. Do you want to go next?
I guess for us, for Coca-Cola, the biggest opportunity we have is that every change, every decision that we've made to kind of move us to a more sustainable, supply chain has resulted in, pros and cons, has its benefits, has its drawbacks. But what we have definitely seen is that there is a customer response when we are actually launching products like those made out of 100% recycled plastic. And us as the local bottler in Texas, and this might be a surprise to a lot of people in the room, I can already bet, but we are the leading bottler when it comes to recycled content usage. Texas averages 50% recycled content across all of its Coca-Cola plastic products. You don't really see that in many other places in the world. And the fact of the matter is, we were able to do that because there was that big opportunity of you have a massive market that not every brand is necessarily tapping into. So I mentioned before, the cost of the recycled resin is higher. So we had to go back and we had to sell that idea and that concept of this is something that not only will allow us to continue operating our business and sell products in plastic packaging, because we are now making sure that we are collecting those products and we are not exacerbating the plastic issue that's already out there. But also, we are able to connect with the consumer and share with the consumer that we share your concerns. We share your perspective that this is something that needs to be addressed, and that the business as usual philosophy that we had a few years ago is no longer working for the today consumer.
I might add that's significantly noteworthy given the vast majority of those materials are made in your region. So congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else? Daniel?
It also comes out to opportunity, looking out on what you can leverage in and be really smart on which project you wish to select, because in the end it gives you value, it gives you also efficiencies and gives you that type of advantage. It also leverages the amount of impact you have on your consumers. And right now, we can see that each day our stakeholders are growing because this type of subjects are more and more important for everybody. So this is canonical, right? This is an advantage that needs to be seen by other companies and take advantage.
Yeah, I love the idea, thinking about what causes companies to act, what causes urgency, and to me, it's pain or opportunity, right? And Daniel, you mentioned the opportunity there. Robert, you want to go next?
Sure. I would say the opportunity for us is obviously to do good at the same time as make money, because we have private investors, private equity firms we need to answer to at the end. So again, just focusing on electric vehicles, again, that's a very rapidly growing market. There's going to be literally thousands of tons of batteries, actually hundreds of thousands of tons, millions of tons of batteries that will be retired in the next 5 to 10 years. And you can't really put these in landfills. A lot of countries don't want that. Certainly every Western country doesn't want that, because these things are made of basically toxic metals. Okay, so you can't just stick them in the ground and forget about them. It's going to create a big problem, and no one wants that. So they're looking for solutions. Even in Europe, they're mandating, I can't remember the year, next, I think, couple years, like something like 80-90% recyclable batteries going forward. So again, governments, people speak. They don't want this toxic waste in their backyard. It has to be disposed of. Our job is to find how to remove it economically, make money on it. And again, the opportunity is there because the metals are worth more than the scrap. So if you can do it intelligently, you know, you can actually make quite a very good business out of this. And kind of that's our objective. That's what we see as the opportunity.
Excellent. Troy?
Yeah, I think when we talk about opportunity, there's some real significant brands, Nestle, the largest CPG in the world, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, that want new technologies. They would love compostable, biodegradable, all end of life. So the brands want the change. It's up to us to deliver that at a competitive price, right? So I think that creates a huge opportunity. I think the other opportunity, and this goes to everybody in here, you can reward a brand when you're in the supermarket and you see them make the change that we want by buying the product. That will drive change faster than anything. An example of that, frozen food, about 6-7 years ago, Conagra changed Healthy Choice from a plastic bowl to a fiber-based bowl that you can safely put in a microwave without eating plastic. And they saw a 40% increase in millennial buyers, right? So they were rewarded for that change. And then they went out and said, okay, now we got to figure out how do we get enough scale and can put this everywhere, right? So we can reward brands for doing the right thing by shopping with them.
As an elder millennial, I'm going to take credit for that. Divya, do you want to add? What opportunity do you see, Casey?
Right. Troy, next time you start naming CPG companies, I want you to start with Kimberly-Clark. Okay.
I forgot which
Just
one
saying. I think what I will say is, and this is a PSA for everybody, is this is a fantastic time for innovation, right? Because of all the words that you have on this panel, all the R's, the only one that has no debate around it is innovation. Nobody's going to challenge you on that. It has like the lowest threshold for entry in terms of does it make sense. Everybody wants dominance in innovation and coming up with cutting edge materials and products. And this is the perfect time to do that, right? Institutional investments are too volatile right now. Tariffs are uncertain, so all the R's there can sometimes end up in huge debates that don't make sense for the supply chain. But internal innovation for companies is one that will never die, right? That's what keeps us ahead. That's what keeps us at the cutting edge of being the world's largest innovator. So continue to do that, right? And this is something I want to say to companies, small companies, and VCs too, is this is the perfect time for us to make those big leaps in innovation. And while everybody is panicking around, world economic negotiations, is the perfect time to capitalize on that. I think that's the biggest opportunity we have in front of us.
Love that. All right. I had one more question, but we only have about 14, 15 minutes left, so I want to turn it over to the audience. Who in the audience has a question for any or all of our panelists? Right here. I'm going to hand you the mic so everybody can hear you.
Don't fall off.
This may seem like an odd question, but I'd like to know from each one of you, what's the mission of your company, which gives you the way you do everything you do? Do you have a mission? And if so, what is it?
All right, I guess I'll start. The mission is pretty simple: refresh the world and make a difference. It's kind of right there in the wording. For us, what does that represent? How does that translate into the day-to-day? Well, we focused on being there for customers. We focus on quality of our products, food safety of our products. We also focus on making sure that our customers can rely on us, delivering the product on time, delivering the product, so operational efficiency, and operational excellence. But finally, the second element, making a difference, that is where we really see an opportunity to drive value through our company, through our supply chain. I've been mentioning this. We use recycled content for our products. I guess, not unintended, because it was definitely intentional consequence of using that recycled content, is also we're boosting the demand for a material that provides certainty then for recycling operators in the territory where we operate, to know that there's going to be a market for what they use, and therefore we make that difference not only through our direct investments but also through our procurement dollars. And that is, the example right now is on recycling, because I would hate to take the time on speaking on everything else and then not leave any other panelists an opportunity to speak. But it is a way that we have shifted the way that we make decisions, so that the bottom line is not the only factor that comes into play whenever we're making any business decision. We're looking at how is this actually going to impact our company and our sustainability strategy today and 10 years in the future.
I think my most immediate mission is to develop a biodegradable diaper for Kimberly-Clark. Terram Lab exists to develop the technologies that eliminate waste. So our master plan in that is first and foremost in quick service and single-use plastic packaging or single-use packaging is to eliminate the harmful chemicals and plastic in that packaging so that we can unlock some reusability and get that technology back to a farm. The second part of that mission is to develop the technologies that can collect food waste, packaging waste, break it into a biomass so it can be brought back to a farm. And that includes PPE materials as well. And then ultimately, farm trusted, get it in the farm, you create a stimulant that eliminates synthetic fertilizers, as you mentioned earlier, which is a big part of why now Gulf of America is a dead zone the size of New Jersey, right? Good thing we named it, why it's dead, right? So maybe we should clean it up and then rename it, right? So, but anyhow, that's our mission, is to eliminate waste, right? And develop the technologies that enhance that or enable that.
Thank you. For us, it would be feeding families. So we are aiming to feeding our consumers with the best quality we are capable of, and we know that we have that compromise, right, with responsibility with our consumers, and be the leading company in terms of corn masa flour production.
So Celanese is a publicly traded company, so at the end of the day we have shareholders that we want to be an attractive investment for. And what I would say is the reason we're here is we believe our chemistry is uniquely able to do sustainability in a way that very few other chemical companies can. And so we see it as a really, really good, strong business case. As the world wants more sustainable materials, we think we can deliver that very effectively.
It's a great question, by the way, and I think I'm going to win.
I'm last, though.
Yeah, that's true. We'll see what yours is. But Kimberly-Clark's mission is better care for a better world. I feel like I should just drop the mic right now. But, the biggest investments Kimberly-Clark makes is in women, baby, child health, water usage across the globe. Kimberly-Clark Foundation just wrote a $16 million check to developing countries and education around hygiene and general health. So it does live by its mission. And, we don't have the splashy ads and we don't have the big posters everywhere that claim Kimberly-Clark made something, but I know every one of you uses Kleenex. So I think it works.
I think I'll come in second then. So our mission statement is to enable local recycling for reuse of metal scrap for the benefit of the environment, the benefit of the people local, and the benefit of our stakeholders, which basically to do it profitably. And again, we plan to do that across the world. So
I'll share with you.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have a question back here.
As I sit here and drink water out of this cup, I'm curious, Joe Rogan, all these people who are having people come on their shows and kind of publicizing the issue of the forever chemicals and the baby's taints are smaller and all this stuff that is now kind of coming out. I'm curious, like from the corporate side of things, and when we talk about responsibility, first of all, scientifically, it sounds like this stuff, it really is somewhat poisonous, as you said. But from your guys' responsibility side to shareholders and to the public who is buying these products that you're making, what is the kind of path forward aside from innovation? Like what are we in trouble right now, or is this something that we can kind of fix our way out of over time, or just have to accept it?
We're in trouble now. I don't know if you saw the New York Times article came out like last week that, sorry, do I need that? Yeah. So I'm usually loud, but yeah, we're in trouble now from a human health perspective. The New York Times article came out last week that said that we have 5 bottle caps of plastic in our brains. Right. So Dr. Leo Trezande has been saying this for a long time, that it's certainly, we're finding it in hearts, and it is killing humans. Right. So yeah, we're in trouble. We need to make a change quickly to get plastic and certainly harmful chemicals. I think we've done a fairly okay job with PFAS, but almost every popcorn bag still has PFAS in it. So, but we need to get plastic and harmful chemicals out of food, and because it is clearly poisoning us.
I do want to add, I mean, plastics is a really big word, and there's an enormous number of essential applications for plastics that we need to not lose sight of. And, you know, we look at kind of the holistic life cycle. I mean, it's a very complex topic, but I do want to make sure we understand that, you know, plastics do an incredible amount of good in terms of what they enable and the society they allow us to have, and frankly, the things that they deliver from, you know, carbon footprint and other important goals. So I do, you know, these are complicated topics, and we need to be careful not to overly distill them into just kind of, you know, simple talking points.
Yeah, and I think I'll add one thing. I don't talk about this very often. I have a PhD in chemistry, and my first job out of graduate school was as an environmental chemist, looking at toxicology and hazard assessments for a lot of these chemicals. And yes, we are in trouble. The other thing that's, I think, clear is that there's no generation of humans that has yet lived a full lifetime with ubiquitous plastics around them all the time, right? Our oldest humans grew up without plastics. And so we don't fully know. I think that's the biggest challenge, is we don't fully know. And we also have this concern around the full life cycle of plastics, right? So we know that cancer rates in Louisiana, in the area where a lot of chemical production happens, are higher than the rest of the U.S. We need to figure that out. Like, there's a lot of things we still need to learn. And so I think maybe our best approach would be a bit more caution moving forward around some of these materials.
You know, I'd like to add another R to the panel word there, because I think you asked a very relevant question, right? Great, we'll do all the front-end innovation, but what about the stuff that's already there? So the R is really remediation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of really big companies, when they've recognized that there is chemicals of concern or microplastics in products, have put in a lot of effort, both from a front-end innovation standpoint, but also from a remediation standpoint, to make sure that we're taking care of it. I think environmental justice initiatives are another biggie, where they recognize that certain communities have been disproportionately impacted, and they work very hard to, I think, streamline that and make sure that we're taking care of both the front end and the back end. But I think that's a very relevant question.
I know we had a question up here in the front. Yes, right there.
Thank you very much. This has been really, really amazing, and I'd like to just offer some solutions from some of the things that I'm doing. Joni Clark, I'm with the Earth Law Center, and we have a governance program that goes into communities in America and 40 countries of the world that could be of value. It can be the bridge, a tool, a language, and a mindset to get those conversations with the brain and the heart opening up to these new possibilities for the solutions that we desperately need now because of all the chemicals everywhere. Also with, I'm part of the Bamboo Village Trust.earth.com in Bali. We started the bamboo revolution a few years back, and now we have amazing bamboo products that can help solve some of these problems because of the biodegrading and the chemistry that's healthy for the body. So I just want to offer, like to talk to all of you about whatever we can do to serve that connecting point, because there's a bamboo zone all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's one of the most prominent green chemists out there, John Warner, says that if you look across the entire economy, we've only got about 35 to 40% of the solutions we need. So we still have a lot of inventing to do for safer materials and safer chemicals in this economy. Right next door there.
I have a question for Robert. He's told us the value of a nickel. So tell us the process of taking, let's say, a Tesla battery and breaking it down to its elements? And how much does that cost, and how much are the elements worth at the end of the day?
So it's a somewhat multi-tiered question.
Sounds like somebody's trying to steal your business, Robert.
No, it's a lot harder than that. So obviously the first step is you got to remove the battery from the vehicle, and there's a whole cooling system around the battery. So there's an ecosystem about preparing the battery for, well, say, recycling. Now, there are some places that literally take the whole battery and just put it in what I call a grinder or hammer mill to make powder. So that powder, by the way, is called black mass because it's black and has a lot of carbon in it. What then happens, and this is where kind of we enter into the equation, we take scrap such as black mass, or it could be shavings or anything else, and we put it through our process, which is, again, it's patented through Oak Ridge, and we have several patents on our own, and basically extracts very specifically the nickel coming out. And then we basically convert that nickel into either nickel metal using what's called electrowinnowing, or we could make nickel hydroxide, or we could make nickel sulfate, all depending on what the market bears the best of. So as far as what all the metals are worth, it actually depends, to your point, on the type of battery. So Tesla tends to use like a NMC, what's called nickel magnesium carbonate, like 811. So they use different ratios. So it's worth, I would say, several $1,000s depending on the spot price. That's the really what's the volatility about. So again, take about I'd say about $2,000, and it probably takes several $100s to probably do the processing. So, and we've got that number even further down, because by recycling all the internal reagents that are used in the recycling, you know, it really reduces the cost and everything. So it's really a fight to keep the cost down lower and lower. Because eventually what's going to happen is a lot of the market is going to start seeing what's called LFP batteries, lithium iron phosphate, and those aren't worth nearly as much as like the Tesla batteries. So you got to get the cost down if you want to play across the world. So that's kind of where we're moving right now.
Is the spot price on nickel a little bit like the market price on fish? Nobody will ever tell you until it's ready to
yeah,
pay.
it's all over the place. I mean, it's gone. Believe it or not, given some of these tariff negotiation issues, it is driving the price up in certain locations. So we complain about it on one hand and accept it on the other. So.
Okay, so the giant number in front of me just turned yellow. So we're going to take one more question. Somebody has a mic, so go ahead. You have the last question.
Thank you. This takes it even before what Divya you were talking about, which is product design, which is probably on the regulatory side, and that is the precautionary principle. Right, and as far as I understand, in Europe, at least in Germany and some of the European countries, they have the precautionary principle, which means prove that it's not harmful to society before you put it out. Here in the US, we put it out, and then society has to prove that it's harmful, right? And so my question is there any movement towards a more logical prove that it's not harmful before we put it out versus having to deal with the consequences that really we're talking about right now?
I don't know. Troy, do you have any thoughts on this? Maybe you should grab a mic. While you're getting a mic, I'll just say some states in the U.S., I don't think there's much movement on the federal level, though, in that direction. But
No, I think relative to the question of if you're harming you relative like food producers, we're definitely seeing RFK is taking that approach. He's copying Europe, right? We have to prove that it's bad. Historically, the EPA and others, it's always been we have to prove that it's bad for you, not prove that it's good for you, right? So the relative to legislation around waste, EPR recently, which is a big move similar to Europe, Oregon, California, Minnesota, is all adopting EPR, which is driving a significant amount of change in the right direction.
Divya, last word. We're at zeros.
I think, with Europe leading the charge on it, a lot of global companies that are selling into Europe are being asked to adopt better business practices. Honestly, I think that's what you're saying, is regulatory bodies are forcing companies to have better business practices in place before you chase the profitability of a product. And I think most companies that are selling into Europe, or Australia has some of the most stringent environmental laws as well, are starting to adopt those practices much earlier in the innovation stage. So it starts out with a characterization of, is this material truly beneficial to society? So it's happening. It's slow and painful, but it's happening.
Awesome. All right, well, we've eaten into 6 minutes of your break. You can blame Bill for that. But let's thank our panelists. And yes, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all.